Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Doing all right. Transitioning back into everyday life. We had a big family get-together at Ocean City, New Jersey, where an uncle of mine has a beach home and some other of my aunts and uncles on that side of the family, as well as our parents this time around, get houses usually at the same time. So we got together with, a couple of dozen family up there in one way or another and enjoyed ourselves. And then you went home, but we headed on up to Maine, where my daughter is in a summer stock theater production, and we were able to see her in a production of Agatha Christie's Spider's Web.
Mm-hmm. And how was that?
It was good. It's supposed to be sort of a more comedic murder whodunit, but I think that most of the humor doesn't really translate from England to the U.S. So it really just comes across more like a standard Agatha Christie whodunit. But yes, my daughter played Pippa, the 12-year-old girl who confesses right at the beginning that she killed essentially her stepfather, who was going to claim back custody of her. But her horror and panic at the sight of her stepfather is what is supposed to really set things in motion. And if you don't believe her panic, then you're not going to buy the rest of the play. And she sells it quite well.
Great. Yeah. Well, I wish I could have seen it.
Meanwhile, we are working on possibly we might have a guest with us in our next episode. We're trying to get that scheduled, and if so, I hope that works out because he's an artist that both Matt and I grew up loving his work, and we're hoping that we can get him on the show.
Great. Yes, I'm a big fan of this guy, and it would be over the moon if we could get him on the show. So we will see about that. But should we go ahead and finish up the books of March 1968?
I think that is a very good thing to do here.
All right, let's go and jump in with Fantastic Four number 72, Where Soars the Silver Surfer. So I have been complaining a lot about the last 4 issues of Fantastic Four, which was a big 4-part storyline featuring the Mad Thinker that I thought was just a big mess and too long and too dull. And so this is uncharacteristic of me to complain about Lee Kirby's sent out Fantastic Four. It's a great book. I thought those were 4 very atypical issues of it being a weaker book. Well, here we are. We are back, and I'm loving getting away from that storyline. This is Where Soars the Silver Surfer. We have a gorgeous cover of the Silver Surfer charging hard right at us with the Watcher in the background and a big red glowing cosmos everywhere. It is just absolutely gorgeous. I'm already feeling much better. We go inside. It says, Where Soars the Silver Surfer, the latest, the greatest, Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby powerhouse presentation, inked by Joe Sinnott, lettered by Sam Rosen, acclaimed by culture lovers everywhere. So I've been complaining. One of the many things I've been complaining about in this book is that Johnny is always in his civvies and he's never in his Fantastic Four outfit. Well, now they've gone ahead and they're trying to ameliorate me just a little bit. They've got his Fantastic Four outfit poking out of his civvies just a little bit to show that he does have some feeling of belonging to this group, but not much because he's almost entirely covered up his Fantastic Four outfit. So we have Johnny, Ben, and Crystal are sitting around moping because Reed and Sue have left the team to go take care of Sue during her pregnancy, which they are, understandably bummed about. And so then they sit around, and then suddenly the Watcher shows up. Now, the Watcher, as I've pointed out so many times on this podcast, is always off model. The Watcher looks absolutely nothing like the original Watcher who appeared in Fantastic Four number 13. He is now buff, and he's got a normal size head, and he basically looks like Mr. Clean from the Mr. Clean cleaning products.
He looks vaguely like a sci-fi Roman.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he's sort of got the toga on. And he's saying, hey guys, Silver Surfer, the supremely powerful Silver Surfer is about to attack all of mankind. We cut to Reed and Sue, who are on a train. They're like going, nope, we're all down in the Fantastic Four. It's all over. Meanwhile, we get to the Silver Surfer, who's decided the only way he can solve mankind's problems is to attack mankind and unite them in opposition to him, as if it's the end of Watchmen or something. And then he decides to start just randomly attacking everywhere. including destroying the pyramids. How many times have the pyramids been destroyed in the Marvel Universe?
That's a good point. I'm pretty sure we saw them destroyed in one of the Sinnott penciled issues of Thor.
Yes. Those poor pyramids, I assume they're putting them back together every time, but, they're really old and I imagine quite fragile if you keep destroying them. But anyway, so then we then get another time on page 6 where it says Silver Surfer is soaring over New York City. And once again, he is soaring over a shoreline that does not exist anywhere in New York City. Jack Kirby just keeps creating these shorelines of New York City that don't exist anywhere. But
yeah, this looks like some kind of bay where it's been built up anyway, one way or the other. Yeah, it looks nothing like it looks awesome.
Yeah.
But it looks nothing like New York City.
It looks like San Diego or something. I don't know.
Yes, that's what I was thinking actually.
Yeah. So then he starts destroying the city of New York, once again destroying buildings that hopefully have been pre-condemned. And the Watcher is like, all right, guys, the three of you go and deal with Silver Surfer. But let's face it, you're not going to be able to. I'm going to have to go get Reed and Sue from their train and unretire them. So then he goes and, there's great pages of fighting of Johnny and Ben versus the Silver Surfer. Then, sure enough, Watcher shows up at the train. I love how, Jack Kirby just can't have dead space in his drawings. He's just always got a scribble on everything. So we're looking at the back of the Watcher's head on page 13, and we're looking at the back of his collar. Now, I've owned a lot of shirts, and I've seen a lot of other people wearing shirts, and I've never seen anything on the back of a collar of a shirt. That's just not a place for art. But Jack Kirby is like, this is boring. I'm drawing the back of a collar. I've got to make it interesting. And he draws, these elaborate squiggles on the back of the collar. So then Sue decides to stay. She is pregnant, very delicate, cannot have anything happen to her. But Reed goes ahead and comes on back. We have a general who looks a lot like Thunderbolt Ross, who is deciding to launch a Sonic Shark missile at the Silver Surfer, but they explain in the Marvel Index that this is not actually Thunderbolt Ross. So then Reed shows up, tries to help out Ben and Johnny. Then they realize that the Sonic Shark missile has been launched at Silver Surfer. They realize it'll kill him. They decide to save the Silver Surfer, make it explode harmlessly in the air, but it has weakened the Silver Surfer enough that he can no longer destroy mankind, and he has now realized it's a bad idea. And that he says, thus I stand before you, no longer invincible, no longer mad enough to feel that one being alone could bring sanity to the human race. And then he decides to go ahead and take off. And then there is some question of what will happen next to the Fantastic Four. I thought this was a delightful issue. I love the Silver Surfer. It's believable enough that he would decide to attack mankind in order to unite it against him. I do feel terrible for those poor pyramids, but other than that, I love this issue. Steve, what do you think of this issue?
Well, and those poor buildings that he knocked over. I'm hoping that nobody was in them, because otherwise he just caused a lot of death.
Robert Moses, Steve. Robert Moses, condemning half of Manhattan. It's fine.
Yes. So I thought this was very much a return to form here. It's great to see the Silver Surfer. Of course, the Watcher, once again, he pays some lip service to I am pledged never to meddle in the affairs of other planets, but I can go do all this other stuff to make sure you guys can interfere. Mm-hmm. That's, once again, it's like the Prime Directive in Star Trek. It only gets mentioned when they're breaking it.
One thing I never talked about, oddly talked about in my other podcast, but never talked about in this podcast, is how much of a fan I was of What If Season 3. There's been a lot of Marvel products that have disappointed people in various ways this year. I was a big fan of Fantastic Four, but less of a fan of some of the other stuff that came out. But I was a huge fan of What If Season 3. I thought it was just fantastic.
Season 3 or Season 2?
No, you may not know that Season 3 exists, because they did not promote it at all. It came out about 6 months ago. There was absolutely no promotion in any way for What If Season 3. I didn't know it existed until a couple months after it had come out. You, it sounds like, still don't know it exists, even though you are a fan of the show who has been watching every other episode and season. This is the reason why it comes up, is that one of the storylines is that the Watcher ends up getting put on trial for interfering too much. And
no, I did see that season. I thought that was Season 2.
No, that was Season 3.
Okay.
This is the one that had the Howard the Duck and Darcy having the egg?
Oh, I saw that. Yes,
Okay.
I saw that one. Yes, that is a fantastic season, and I particularly like the conclusion when, as you said, Uatu is put on trial by the other Watchers, and there is so much Kirby crackle depicted
Yes.
in that finale, and they do it really, really well.
Yes.
It's great. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought that was season 2. That was season 3. All right. Yes. And we actually got to see Happy Hogan as the Freak
Oh, that's right. Yes.
in the first episode of that season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Great issue. Real return to form for Fantastic Four, and does not yet entirely deal with the issue of how Sue's pregnancy will be accommodated in this book, but it kicks the can a little further down the road. It at least brings Reed back into the fold for now, and we will see what happens next issue.
I just wanted to call out a little bit more dialogue from Silver Surfer here. On page 4, he says, "Here, on the fairest of all worlds, here, where mortals could create a living utopia, the very air I breathe seems tainted with the arid stench of bigotry, hatred, greed, and oppression. But if men refuse to turn away from wanton, unthinking savagery, then shall the Silver Surfer show them the fate that must be theirs." And, A, that feels kind of relevant today. B,
Yeah.
brings up the whole thing of he used to be the Herald of Galactus. He was the Angel of Death, basically, coming to countless worlds before this. This speech and basically the Silver Surfer's overall attitude makes more sense if, as you have supposed, the original thought was that the Silver Surfer was a creation of cosmic power by Galactus that has then been discovering his own humanity and discovering all of the pros and cons of our humanity. It makes a little bit less sense if he has been the one who has led thousands of planets to their doom.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a panel that I want to point out in here, page 11, panel 1. The Silver Surfer is delivering a gut punch to Thing, and this punch is one that I recognized from the issue of Tales of Suspense where Gene Colan got the flu halfway through his assignment and it had to be taken over by Jack Kirby, and then it was just nothing but pages of pounding. This is I don't know whether this is just a stock Jack Kirby position or whether he actually went back and copied his previous panel on there, but one way or the other, it definitely reminded me of that.
Yes.
Then there's a weird reference to what seems to be to God in here. At one point, the Watcher says to Sue, when Sue says the Silver Surfer is all-powerful, he says, "All-powerful? There is only one that deserves that name, and his only weapon is love."
Yeah.
That seems a little bit odd. That seems a little out of character for this. And finally, the last thing I'm going to mention is when they're trying to knock this Sonic Shark missile out of the sky because of whatever reasons they've decided on. Thing says to Reed, as Thing is getting out of the cockpit, "You mean I'm just supposed to belt it one?" Says, "Right. You have to make it swerve off course. But it's set to explode any second." Reed said, "That's the chance we take. Don't miss it." It's just sort of like, "But I could die." "Yes, but I'm willing to take that chance."
Right.
Anyway, but yes, overall, really fun issue. Good return to form.
Yes, I agree. It's interesting. This is sort of a backdoor pilot for Silver Surfer getting his own book, which is going to happen in a couple months, but without Kirby, because it's going to be Lee and Buscema giving Silver Surfer his own book. Okay, let's go and move on to Strange Tales 166, and you will cover that.
Yes, so, Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, nothing can halt the walking, talking, I don't care man. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean Voltorg.
Last issue was Voltorg, Voltorr. And now his name is changed to Voltorg with a G at the end. But what on earth is going on this cover? Voltorg is attacking Doctor Strange. That's fine. And then there's a big green blob in between them. And I can't figure out what that big green blob is. Is that something that Voltorg is using to attack Doctor Strange? Or is that something Doctor Strange is using to attack Voltorg? Or something in between?
I'm reading that as some kind of mystic barrier that Doctor Strange is conjuring. But it doesn't matter that much. So Stan Lee triggers off this triple threat thriller told by Jim Lawrence, drawn by George Tuska, plotted and inked by Dan Adkins.
Yes.
Voice creations by Artie Simek. So I have no idea what the heck is going on here.
No.
Does that mean that Dan Adkins actually did very, very basic breakdowns to be penciled by George Tuska and then inked by Dan Adkins?
And scripted by Jim Lawrence, presumably?
Yeah. That's what would seem to make the most sense to me, to make sense of these nonsensical credits.
Or maybe he just typed up a plot on a typewriter. I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah. Very strange indeed. So we've got a splash page at the beginning here, and Dan Adkins is doing some neat stuff with layered, all sorts of layers of Zipatone on top of each other as Doctor Strange is doing something to Voltorg.
Yeah, I gotta say, so that when originally there was the Walking Talking I Don't Care Man on the cover of a sci-fi pulp with art by Gray Morrow, who would later go on to be a Marvel artist, and then notorious swiper Dan Atkins, who was penciling and inking last issue, went ahead and swiped the Walking Talking I Don't Care Man and turned him into Voltor, who is now called Voltorg. But the problem here is that Gray Morrow was trying to draw, and intentionally, this was presumably a satiric story he was illustrating, and he was trying to draw an intentionally silly looking robot. And Atkins is in the middle of telling an entirely non-silly story here in Doctor Strange, and has this now very silly looking robot, and Tuska makes him look even sillier than he looked last issue because he gives him no knees. He had knees when we saw him last time, but now he is stiff-legged, which there is nothing sillier than stiff-legged robots. And the whole thing is it's just a huge problem in that you've got this robot who is designed to be intentionally silly looking, who is now being used in this very serious story. Well,
you say this is not a silly story. It's not an intentionally silly story.
Yes, it is very much an unintentionally silly story.
Yes. So this is the Sorcerer Supreme versus the Scientist Supreme here. This is the ultimate weapon of the so-called Scientist Supreme. We get several pages of Doctor Strange fighting Voltorg. Eventually, Doctor Strange uses one of his somewhat reoccurring tricks of creating illusions of multiple copies of himself so that Voltorg doesn't know which one is the real one to fight. As it turns out, none of them are, because Doctor Strange has taken the opportunity to run and try to capture the Scientist Supreme, just leaving Voltorg to fight these phantoms of himself. And what is this guy? Yandroth, I guess, the Scientist Supreme, has Victoria Bentley in just a standard cage and comes and grabs her and is going to kidnap her to some other dimension or some other world where he can continue his conquest of various worlds.
Always a pet peeve of mine. When people are in cages in comic books, there are always cages you could easily just slip through. And once again, this is a cage where it's like, yeah, it'd be somewhat annoying, but she could shove her head through this thing. She could squeeze out of that cage.
Yeah, well, the thing that bugs me about these things, and this is not particularly noticeable in this one, but there's never a toilet in any of these things.
Well, no.
Not like real ones. Anyway, Doctor Strange catches up with Yandroth and is starting to attack him when Voltorg comes up from behind and re-engages with the real Doctor Strange. Yandroth is able to escape with Victoria Bentley through some sort of teleportation tubes, right as Doctor Strange is able to finally dispatch with Voltorg and turn him into a pile of gears and sheet metal. Doctor Strange changes the destination of this teleportation tube right at the last moment and is going to then transport himself to the same location that he just sent them to, but he just took a guess that maybe this is sending them to Earth, and indeed it did. On page 11, panel 3, there is a fantastic panel of him teleporting through the cosmos. That is quite Doctor Strange worthy, I will say. And in the end, he appears at Stonehenge, where we last saw the Ancient One being melded into one of the henges, and it is implied that we are going to see him again. And I do note that the Ancient One does not look Asian here in this depiction. He
True.
looks like an old English dude. That is this story. Overall, not that interesting, but we do get a little bit of great Doctor Strange art, although a lot of it is pretty silly art up before that. But so anyway, that's what's going on here. Just once more, Doctor Strange still hasn't been able to use the bathroom for about a year and a half here, and looks like no chance he's going to have anytime soon. So what do you think?
Still one continuous storyline that's been going for about 20 issues at this point. Yeah, so Tuska is not as good of a penciler as Atkins himself is, but we have Atkins plotting and inking here, but not penciling. But obviously, the good thing about it is fewer swipes. So we've got a just continuing the swipe from the last page of last issue that continues throughout this issue, but we have no new swipes this time, which is nice and shows why Atkins eventually became just an inker, because that way we could get his high quality line work without any of his swipes that he constantly uses when he is penciling. But ultimately, it's a little disappointing that Tuska is not as good penciler as Atkins and is stuck with sort of worst of all possible worlds, stuck with this very silly design that Atkins swiped last issue and makes it even sillier by taking away the poor robot sneeze. But I agree that the one panel that where Tuska really rises to the level of some of the great artists that we've had previously in this book is the middle panel on page 11, where he is catapulting himself across the cosmos. That's a real chance where Tuska gets to shine and go like, okay, it's Doctor Strange. I got to bring my A game, and does some great work.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about the S.H.I.E.L.D. portion of the book. Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Supreme Headquarters, International Espionage Law Enforcement Division. If death be my destiny. If you ever think that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s ever-loving cast of characters is something else, wait till you read who put this masterpiece together. Editor Stan Lee, Marvel's P.T. Barnum. Well, that's certainly true. Artist/writer Jim Steranko, Marvel's Bad Boy Peck. Is that Gregory Peck? I don't know. I don't know what that's referring to. Inker Joe Sinnott. This is interesting. Steranko and Sinnott. Marvel's Huck Finn. Okay, sure. Letterer Sam Rosen. Marvel's Little Lord Fauntleroy. I almost wonder whether this is Jim Steranko just sort of making fun of Stan Lee's usual credits. Let's just make them utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, anyway, what we've got in this issue is just a spectacular all super spy issue, which I am all here for.
Yeah.
So we start out with and once again, lots of those comic book innovations that we have heard a lot about in this issue. We start out with...
sorry, I'm looking up Peck's Bad Boy. Henry Peck, popularly known as Peck's Bad Boy, is a fictional character created by George Wilbur Peck, first appearing in the 1883 novel Peck's Bad Boy and His Pa.
Okay.
Played by Jackie Coogan in some movies in the 1920s.
So I guess that is a particular character that has fallen out of the public memory.
Yes.
All right. So we start out with Nick Fury in a glider suit that is really well imagined, with all sorts of carabiners and harnesses and buckles and stuff like that all over it. Actually, the buckles look like they prefigure some Jim Lee stuff from the 90s. Jim Lee or Rob Liefeld. So, and he's coming at us at a really dynamic sideways angle. And he does have his cigar with him, which is ashing as he flies through the air. So he is not going to be able to hang on to that cigar long, though, because he is intercepting this ship that is going to be going underwater, and he's able to grab onto the ship and is holding his breath, or if he's got some of those oxygen breathing tablets that I think we've seen in the past. One way or the other, he is able to follow this ship down to an underwater hideout or headquarters of the Claw. So we're going to see more of that in a moment. Meanwhile, the Claw's airship is being sucked up by some sort of tractor beam towards the helicarrier, and we see once again some really sort of psychedelic effect here here. And I don't know whether that is a Zipatone pattern or whether that was just drawn as is, but it's these wavy sort of effects that create a sort of strobe effect to the human eye. It really is quite something. Mm-hmm. We then go back to the bottom of New York Harbor, where Nick Fury has pulled out some kind of a rebreather here, which reminds me of the James Bond gadget, which you were talking about several episodes ago, mm-hmm. Where people were like, hey, how can we get that gadget? They're like, it's a movie. It's not a real thing. But he's able to cut his way into this headquarters. And page 6, again, more of those comic book innovations here. Nick has some X-ray specs that's able to show him the way through this maze-like HQ, and we actually see a circular maze-type design as amazing. Yeah, I see what you did there. Yep, right. I
did not mean to do that.
As he gets turned around in various ways, you see the dialogue turn upside down and then on its edge to sort of show you the disorientation that he must be feeling with this. Page 7, there's more sort of MC Escher type effects here. One thing with a bunch of stairs where it's not quite sure whether they are stairs on the ceiling or stairs that are going up. And all sorts of different spy gadgetry and stuff like that he needs to use. Really sort of swirly page layout on page 7. So then, meanwhile, we see that Jimmy Woo is having a shootout with some of the Claw's goons, is captured by the Claw, who then looks like he is going to disintegrate the guy. But then, what's the woman's name?
Suwan.
Suwan. Does Suwan talk him out of disintegrating him? I believe so. One way or the other, Jimmy Woo is held captive by Claw and is at his mercy. Page 10, we get what will be the corner box for Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., when it becomes its own separate book. I'm pretty sure they just cut out and paste this image right here of Nick. Nick Fury ends up in hand-to-hand combat with the Claw, while Suwan is letting Jimmy Woo down from this trap that he's in. And at the end, Suwan looks like she has been killed by the thing that was supposed to kill Jimmy Woo, and Nick Fury is swearing vengeance on the Claw. Mm-hmm. So, overall, just a spectacular adventure. Just everything that Nick Fury is doing here is super spy stuff that is simultaneously right up there with anything James Bond is pulling off, and at the same time is really innovating what you can really do with comic book storytelling.
Yes. Yeah, I had just a couple questions. I'm not sure New York Harbor is this deep. You know, they dive deep down under New York Harbor and find a huge base that is at the bottom of New York Harbor
That's a tower.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a tower at the bottom of it, yes, right?
Towering base down at the bottom of New York Harbor. But yeah, as I say in my notes, we just don't deserve a book this good. Page 6 with the maze layout is just brilliant. It's quite a comic book innovation. Now, I don't think you pointed out that once again we have a binocular device for Nick Fury.
Yeah, I didn't point it out here when I was describing it. I did point it out in our social media feed.
Yes. So Nick Fury is once again wearing binoculars as part of his super spy stuff. And it's like, Nick, you're a rather monocular guy. I'm not sure you should be using binoculars here. And then, oh my God, the swirly pattern on page 7, just absolutely amazing with the Escher-esque visuals. I just love it. But then we get to page 8 with Jimmy Woo being attacked outside of the building he's in. And the first panel of page 8, where he is hiding behind this car, firing his gun at somebody, and then the person who is firing at him, we can only see in the side view mirror of the car. We see them firing in the side view mirror, and then we see the bullets passing through the actual frame. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely amazing. And then Jimmy Woo goes ahead and turns and fires behind his back like it's Gunsmoke or something. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love this book.
Yeah. Spectacular stuff.
Yes.
Spectacular stuff. All right. So, but let's leave these things behind, and we will move on to Tales of Suspense, which is you.
Put away childish things and move on to something that is equally childish.
Yes.
All right, let's go into Tales of Suspense, featuring Iron Man and Captain America at the mercy of the Magia. It says on the cover, it's just an Iron Man cover. This is issue 99, so we're about to get to issue 100 when the book will pop out into 2. I think, is this the last issue of Tales of Suspense? I believe it may be the last issue ever, possibly. So then we go ahead and jump into the book, and this is very interesting. The Invincible Iron Man at the mercy of the Magia. Of course, they're not allowed to say Mafia because they were afraid they would get in trouble with the Mafia, so they call it the Magia instead, M-A-G-G-I-A. Also, Vince Coletta was right there, and they didn't want to... Didn't want to offend him in any way, so it says...
Didn't want to make it weird.
Don't make it weird. Stanley, we should explain that Vince Coletta, there's always been rumors that Vince Coletta was had family connections to the Mafia. We don't know if that's true. Please don't sue us, anyone.
So the story that I have heard is that supposedly Jim Shooter told a story of Stan Lee one day being out at lunch with Coletta, and there were some mob guys who were in the lunch establishment with them, and Stan Lee asked Vince Coletta to introduce him to the Mafia folks. You know, I guess mafiosi, is that the term? But so according to Jim Shooter, Stan Lee was sure enough of this that he asked to be introduced, and according to this story, was introduced to these mafiosi.
Yeah. Supposedly there are some connections there, but we don't know. We don't want to cast any aspersions. At the mercy of the Magia, Stan Lee superlatively supervises an Archie Goodwin and Gene Colan colossal collaboration inked by Johnny Craig, lettered by Artie Simek. So Johnny Craig was a big EC artist. He is back here. He's got sort of a broad cartoony style. He looks kind of like Jack Davis. You wouldn't think this would work over Gene Colan, but I like this issue. I think that this is a very dynamic issue. That's one thing Craig and Cohen have in common, even though they don't have a lot in common. They're both rather dynamic, and I think that this is a fun action issue. We begin with Whiplash has been whipping the heck out of Iron Man for quite some time throughout the entirety of last issue. Then Iron Man, we see, has a little dial inside his glove that can turn his repulsors up to peak. It says peak, P-E-A-K. And he's like, okay, I'll go ahead and hit him with my peak repulsors. I don't know why he would ever have them set any lower than that, but okay.
It's stun versus kill, you know.
I guess. Yeah.
Although it would be funny if there were another setting that said P-I-Q-U-E.
Yes, in a fit of peak. So then we cut back to Sitwell, former Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., I guess still current Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but who is now a member of the Iron Man supporting cast. He is driving across town trying to rescue Iron Man. Then the cops see him racing down the highway and chase after him. I love page 5 of Sitwell hauling ass down the highway and then the cop deciding to give chase. When we had Douglas Wolk on, I think he pointed out that Cohen is really good at car chases, and indeed he gets to prove that here.
Yeah, panel 1 on that page does sort of bring out some of that Johnny Craig kind of look with the speeding car there.
Yes. Sitwell then arrives and finds the people who are trying to get Morgan Stark out of the country. And we've never really seen Sitwell have that much martial prowess before, but suddenly he says, can it be that you're unaware of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s assault defense tactics? This, as any novice knows, is step 1. And he turns out to be really good at kicking ass. And kicks a lot of ass, and they sort of make it work in terms of, you know, as I talked about in my blog, the idea of the book-taught amateur. He is a book-taught amateur fighter here, but he knows what he's doing. And
what this reminds me of was the MCU short that you can find on one of the DVDs for MCU Phase 1, where we see Coulson kick ass for the first time.
Yeah.
Where it's somewhere in New Mexico. I think it's in the lead up to Thor. And we see this mild-mannered guy that we've seen suddenly do this, basically.
Yeah. So then he goes ahead and re-grabs Morgan Stark. I guess at this point, the cop catches up and says, I go after a speeder and I wind up with 3 prize gunsels. Sitwell then goes ahead and gets on a boat, goes out to the boat where Iron Man is deep in the hull. Well, I guess not deep in the hull. He is in a attached submarine beneath the hull. And Sitwell then goes to try to rescue him. I guess setting his phasers to peak didn't help much because Whiplash eventually defeated Iron Man and has him on a table trying to, pry his helmet open with a laser. then what should happen? just, you would think the story would be interesting enough at this point. A lot of interesting things are going on. But then we get a whole new element where AIM attacks. AIM attacks the Maggia in their own submarine. I was going to say it's a submarine that doesn't have the words AIM stenciled on it, but it does, just not as big as it usually does.
Oh, of course it does.
I didn't see it at first because it was just colored blue on blue, but yes, it is there. So then suddenly we get a whole new element to the story where it's AIM versus the Maggia versus S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Iron Man. And that's where we leave things off. I kind of like this. I like this issue. It's just fascinating to see Johnny Craig show up at Marvel. He's not famous for doing much work at Marvel. And it's fascinating to see him inking Cullen. I think it's very dynamic results. I like that, the Iron Man Whiplash story continues to move at sort of a snail's pace. It still doesn't proceed that much in this issue, but a lot of other stuff proceeds in terms of Sitwell and AIM and Morgan Stark and all that stuff. So I like this issue a lot. What do you think of this issue, Steve?
Yeah, the Sitwell action hero stuff plays really well. I think that is very entertaining and makes this a better story than some of the ones we've been getting lately from Iron Man. Page 11, panel 1 is another place where it looks like we're seeing a little more of the Johnny Craig influence showing up in the inks, with the gun soul who's there getting blasted by the water. The expression on his face looks very EC, as it were. This is fun. And yeah, I do kind of like the kind of war of all against all here. Iron Man and S.H.I.E.L.D. versus AIM versus the Maggia is a fun development.
Yes, I like it a lot. Okay, let's go and move on to the back half of the book, Captain America, Living Legend of World War II, The Man Who Lived Twice. So this is interesting. We continue to have new anchors showing up. Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby created it. Sid Shores and Artie Simek inked and lettered it. What more could a true Marvelite ask for? So Sid Shores, again, someone who's not going to do a tremendous amount of work for Marvel, but is showing up here and is inking Kirby very differently from Synod has been inking Kirby. It's not bad. I kind of like it. You know what it really reminds me of? It really reminds me of Kirby inking himself. It reminds me of the Kirby art from the 1940s, where I think Kirby was inking himself. Whoever was inking Kirby in the 1940s, this reminds me of that.
Yeah, I was not a fan of the inking in this issue at all. So we have different opinions on that, but that is fine.
It's very smudgy, indiscriminate spotting of blacks, but I kind of like it. So then we pick up where we left off last issue with Captain America and the Black Panther down in a pit, and then who should show up but Baron Zemo, who everybody thought was dead a long time ago, who lowers down a rope to get them to come up. And this issue is sort of a silly issue in that Baron Zemo has the drop on Captain America and Black Panther. Then suddenly they get free and fight for a couple pages. Then he zonks them both out. Then they're back at headquarters where they get free and they fight for a couple of pages. And then he zonks them both out. And then they get free and fight for a couple of pages. And then he zonks them both out. That is what happens in this book. They three zonkings and they end up right back where they started. However,
there's a panel at one point in one of these reversals where one of Zemo's guys is shooting Captain America in the back and saying, at short range, this paralyzer pistol will stop them cold. And I'm thinking, you know what else will stop them cold? Lead.
A pistol.
Exactly. A gun. What panel is that here? Because I noticed that it looks like, so this is on page 10, panel 2. And that there's no way that's a Kirby face. Page 10, panel 2. I think it is. I think that may be the one true Kirby face we've seen yet in the 1960s Marvel. It looks like, this whole issue to me looks like 1940s Kirby comics. I think it's really interesting. Schwartz is either inking really heavy or really lightly. I don't know. I don't know if he's letting pure Kirby come out or if he is adding his own element to it. For all I know, I don't know. I haven't done my research. Maybe Schwartz was his inker during the 40s, but it's very interesting. Meanwhile, there is another storyline going on that is progressing, and that is we still have Sharon Carter, who still has never been called Sharon Carter. She is called Agent 13. We have her, by sheer coincidence, working on a case that brings her to the same place as her great love, Captain America. She is undercover as Irma Kruhl, a beret-wearing German spy. I believe that's Kruhl.
Kruhl. Irma Kruhl or Irma Kruhl. So then, like Cruella de Vil. And so then she shows up and she's like, yes, I am an evil enemy spy. You should believe me. I'm not an undercover agent for S.H.I.E.L.D. And they're like, oh, are you? Well, then surely you wouldn't mind killing Captain America. Here's a gun pointed at his head. And she's like, oh no, neither my life nor that of my beloved is as vital as my mission. Heaven forgive me. I know what I must do. Next issue, the fatal ending. So then that's where we leave off on a cliffhanger. And that's a darn good thing, because it's nice to see that some storyline is progressing, because the Black Panther Captain America storyline did not progress whatsoever, other than them being outside and ending up inside. But I like this issue a lot. I like Shore's inking. It's very different from Sinnot, but I think it's equally dynamic, I would say. I really like the fight scenes. I love getting more Agent 13 Sharon Carter stuff going on. And I love having a lot of battling, even if it is inconsequential battling, between Captain America, Black Panther, and Zemo. But you, sir, don't like it as much as I do.
The inking just comes across as kind of haphazard and slapdash. And sometimes there can be some inking where that can add a bit of an element of action to it, of immediacy, things like that. But this just seems like I don't know, slapdash to me. I'm not a fan of it.
And says next issue, Cap in his own mag. But what about Iron Man? Just wait and see. He will get his own mag a little bit later. So then that is it. So I assume that we're doing Captain Marvel last, just because we did Captain Marvel last time.
I was unsure of what we were doing, but yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so let's go and do Avengers number 50.
All right. So Avengers number 50, they did not seem to do anything special for this anniversary issue. It is just a normal, everyday issue of Avengers.
I don't know. I say in my notes, it is worthy of being issue number 50. I think it's a really good issue that is a big conclusion to a big ongoing storyline. It felt like it was worthy of being issue 50.
It feels like it's worthy of being issue 50. It does not feel like they did anything special for issue 50.
Yeah, maybe not.
They just gave us a particularly good issue. So, to tame a Titan, Stan Lee has done it again. Done what? Why, inspired. Done what? Why, inspired Roy Thomas and John Buscema to co-create another comicdom classic, Natch. What else? So we start off with Giant Man and Hawkeye yelling at each other, with Jan in the background trying to calm them down and stop them.
We're on issue 50. What percentage of issues of this book have begun with, well, especially since issue 17, have begun with Hawkeye and Goliath or some other pair fighting with each other while Jan tries to make peace? It is so tiring that we've had this happen so many times.
Yes. It's always Hawkeye fighting with somebody.
Yeah.
Whether it's Cap or Pietro or Hank. But in this case, Hawkeye is thinking to himself that what he's really upset about is Natasha taking off without him and seemingly breaking up with him. And they all recognize that they're just on edge because the Avengers are down to 3 members again, which, as you've talked about, 4 is too few. 3 is 1 too fewer, I guess. Jan, though, seems to be excited for the idea that they might retire so that she can marry Hank. Meanwhile, though, the main plot that we've got this issue is with Hercules versus Typhon. And we see Hercules has been transported to a place that they referred to last issue as Limbo. Whether or not this is the same Limbo that Rom used to dispatch the dire wraiths to, or that Belasco lives in, or that the Space Phantom would send people to, or, whatever else, is unclear at this point. But I'm sure that somebody in the future has gone and said, tied this into all of those things. Mm-hmm. Probably that person is named Roger Stern, but I'm just guessing. So, anyway, Hercules is fighting various things in this land. Page 4. Now, I'm reading the Marvel Unlimited recolored versions. You're reading the original scans. Page 4, panel 1. There is a coloring error here, which I'm wondering if is in the original or not. If you look at Hercules' right shoulder as he is giving a left hook to this monster that he's being held by, there is something that should clearly be a tentacle around his shoulder that in here is flesh colored.
Yeah, no, it's colored, flesh colored here too. I just thought it was a very lumpy shoulder, but you're right. It's supposed to be a tentacle, and it's been colored, flesh colored, which is a huge problem. Yeah.
Yeah, because I first saw that. I'm like, what is that growth? I'm like, yeah, he needs to go to a doctor and get that looked at. And I'm like, oh, okay, no, it's a monster tentacle. Which also, if you got a monster tentacle wrapped around your shoulder, you should probably also go get that looked at.
Yes.
So Hercules is able to reunite himself with the rest of the Olympian gods. And they figure out, I guess, that since Hercules is only a demigod, they're able to transport him back to Earth to fight Typhon, because whatever magic that Typhon had used only works against the gods, and since he's half human, they can send him back. So Typhon finds an American warship and decides to attack it, I guess just to see how human ways of war have changed in his absence. And the Avengers end up showing up and trying to take out Typhon. And we get an interesting sequence where Hank, in his Ant-Man guise, is able to tell his ants to undermine the earth underneath Typhon's legs. And then he ends up collapsing into hollow, spongy earth here, which is a trick that we have not seen in quite a while from Ant-Man. But it is not the first time we've seen it done, but it's been a little bit. So some fantastic fight scenes between the Avengers in general, but Hercules in particular, against Typhon. Fight, and fantastic John Buscema fight scenes.
Inking himself.
That's right. Yes, he is inking himself in this one, just as he was in the previous one. But I just love John Buscema fight scenes. On page 16, when Hercules has vanquished Typhon, at one point he is waxing braggadocio. Would that be a right term?
Braggadocious?
Anyway, yes, he is waxing braggadocious at the unconscious Typhon. And he says at one point, "Rise, most monumental of traitors. Rise, thou Brobdingnagian." Brobdingnagian blemish upon the celestial universe. And I had to look that one up. I am not well read enough to know that this is essentially the opposite of Lilliputian. It is from Jonathan Swift. So the Lilliputians are the land of little tiny people that the protagonist runs into, and Brobdingnag something is the land of the giants.
Yes.
So, but I don't know that Hercules would be up on his Jonathan Swift.
Yes.
A little hard to believe. So Hercules is able to make it back to Olympus, and what is this? Reignite some eternal flame or something like that is able to then bring the Olympian gods back. From limbo, Typhon is cast down into the dread domain of Pluto, which here in the Marvel Universe is actually a burning land, just like in Christian theology, rather than the cold, dark area that it was in Greek and Roman mythology. Hercules' banishment is ended. He's allowed to come back to the gods. We see a great feast image on page 19. John Buscema has fun with that. And Hercules is happy to be back in Olympus, welcome in Olympus again, but he seems to regret not being able to be with the Avengers, whom he had grown to respect. And in the end, Hawkeye has come out of this adventure with redoubled efforts to make the Avengers work and to go and get Pietro and Wanda back from Magneto. So next-ish, Thor, Iron Man, the Calculating Collector, and another big change in the life of Goliath. In other words, this is going to be a gasser. So be here, Hallowed One.
Yes. So I don't want to shock you, but I think Goliath may finally get his powers back again after constant going back and forth with Goliath having his powers or not. Yeah, this is... On the one hand, this is a really good issue in that we have Hercules going back and fighting Typhon and defeating him, which is wonderfully penciled and inked by John Buscema. In terms of the actual Avengers, at this point, Goliath has no powers other than his ant helmet, and he can no longer grow or fight or anything like that. The Wasp is the Wasp, and Hawkeye is Hawkeye. So like they all show up to help defeat Typhon, and they basically get to get their asses kicked by him for a couple of pages, and then until Hercules shows back up, and then Hercules beats up Typhon. These are pretty pitiful Avengers at this point. And the book is still sort of limping by in terms of the actual cast of the book. Hopefully they can get Wanda and Pietro back soon, or some new Avengers showing up, which we are going to get. And there is a letter, I should say, by Tony Isabella at the end, who has written letters before and will go on to become a major comics writer himself and writer about comics. I will say, in terms of the cover of this issue, what on earth is Hawkeye doing? This is like, it's always tricky when you're doing a cover when you want to show your team riding to the rescue, but you don't want to have them all be on one plane because then they'll all be overlapping each other. So you want to show some of them up in the air, but none of them can actually, well, that's not even true. The Wasp can fly. She should be the one up in the air. But one thing they tend to do on the cover of Marvel books is they have one of the heroes like swinging in on a trapeze just in order to fill up the top part of the cover of a book. And here we have Hawkeye, who has seemingly wrapped a rope around his leg, and then so that he can, of course, have both of his hands free to use his bow. And he's just flinging himself about with a rope not even tied around his leg, just sort of loosely wrapped around his leg. It is the silliest thing in the world.
It's right up there with, I don't know whether you've ever seen that image of the Walt Disney Tarzan movie.
Yes.
Where he's swinging on a vine, but you see that both of his arms are in sight and holding Jane or whatever it is. And so it's like, how is he holding onto that vine? And people have drawn little diagrams that he's actually clenching it with his butt cheeks. So this is right up there with that.
I did think of that, yes. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the final book of the month, Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is back. Now, if there's one thing I know about Captain Marvel, if there's one thing we should all know about Captain Marvel, is that he has irregular publication. It is the hallmark. It is at the very core of Captain Marvel as a character is irregular publication schedules. Well, sure enough, we last saw Captain Marvel show up in the Marvel Superheroes anthology book. In the 12th issue, they went ahead and introduced a new feature, Captain Marvel. And then that issue came out 3 months ago. And now here they put out Marvel Superheroes number 13, 3 months later, still featuring Captain Marvel, plus a bunch of backups. So backups of reprints of old Submariner, Captain America, Human Torch, and Black Knight, the medieval Black Knight, and the Vision, the original Golden Age Vision, are all showing up.
You know, one thing that
features.
would have been interesting for us doing this podcast is if we were going and reading through the Golden Age reprint books as they came out as well, because those would also be on the stands at the same time as the issues that we're reading. And, you know, we could see how, oh, yes, readers who have been seeing these reruns of the Vision, well, then when the Silver Age Vision shows up, how would that inform that? And, you know, seeing the Golden Age Captain America stories, how does that inform our current reading of Captain America? I mean, I don't think that would have made any sense, and clearly we didn't do it, but it's an interesting concept.
Yes, if anybody wants to go ahead and try to steal our thunder and go back and do that, I encourage you to do it. Okay, where's Toxa's entry? So this makes sense that, you know, we saw the big Kree menace on Earth was the Sentry, that originally that was how the Kree were introduced, was the Fantastic Four fighting the Sentry. And now we've got this sort of turncoat. We've got this Kree agent on Earth who was already sort of fighting with the Kree. It makes sense that he would fight the Sentry. We go ahead and begin the issue. Stan the Man Lee, Stan the Man, see, I have a hard time with my L's, so this is going to be tricky. Stan the Man Lee lovingly lords it over a Roy the Boy Thomas and Gene the Dean culmination of co-creation, embellished by Paul Reinman, lettered by Sam Roseman, so Paul Reinman's back.
I have generally been a fan of Paul Reinman in the past. I am not a fan of Paul Reinman over Gene Colan here.
No, he was excellent over Kirby. He is not doing a good job over Gene Colan here. You generally want someone over Colan. Well, I say that. Sometimes it works to have someone who is equally sort of loose and slippery over Colan as Colan himself, and sometimes it works to have someone who is much more solid like Dan Atkins. But this one just is not working very well. We begin with Captain Marvel is in his rented room working on his Uni-Beam, figures out how to make it more of a wrist device, which is going to help him going forward so he doesn't have to be constantly pointing guns at everybody. Takes one of his pills. He goes out to use his Uni-Beam out to destroy some trees, make sure it's working well. Then suddenly we get a bizarre plot turn where he has been having some tension with Jan Rog, who is the commander of his mission, and Jan Rog, who then has Marvel's love of his life, Una, in the Kree ship that is still orbiting the Earth. And then Jan Rog finally decides, I'm just going to blow up Captain Marvel. I'm going to send our ship down. I'm going to blow him up. I've got him in my sights. And then suddenly, bizarre plot turn, a person who is flying his own prop plane, a normal Earth human flying his own prop plane, just happens to fly in the way. What are the odds of that? In the way of this beam that is being shot at Captain Marvel. Well, then it turns out there's an even bigger coincidence going on here, because Jan Rog then at this point just gives up and flies away. Captain Marvel finds the person who was blown up in the ship, and it's like, oh, well, the person is dead, which is somewhat unusual for the Marvel Universe, but it's like this person's name was Walter Lawson, and he was an expert on missile guidance systems, heading for a nearby base on reassignment. And so he's like, I'll just take his place. That's exactly where I want to be. And I would kind of like this guy. And I'm going to go ahead and take his place, which is quite a coincidence. We see that Una has gone ahead and knocked out everybody on the ship to keep Jan Rog from killing Captain Marvel, and then goes ahead and teleports down
a new shipment of oxygen breathing serum.
Yes. We then get to, bizarrely, Captain Marvel, a.k.a. Captain Marvel, who now has a new secret identity as Walter Larson, decides to show up to work on this missile base, and it works out just fine.
It's like, I know that, they're like, okay, well, this guy, he's from a super advanced spacefaring race, so sure, he could come and work in our space program, but then it's, it would be like, oh, okay, so I'm going to go back to caveman times. Yeah, sure, I know how to create napped flint blades. That's going to take a lot of extra learning. Like, what are you? Anyway.
But then one day he shows up for work and finds out that they've been working on that Sentry that we last saw in that Fantastic Four issue, and he finds out the person in charge of that project is none other than Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers is introduced in this issue. She eventually will go on to take over the role of Captain Marvel herself after many, many years. First, she will become Ms. Marvel for many years, and then she will take on other names like Binary and Warbird before she finally becomes Captain Marvel herself. And I like her. I think Gene Colan draws a fetching Carol Danvers here. She's in sort of a modern 60s pants and a sweater, and she's got her pearls on. She is sort of suspicious of Walter Larson right away, but goes ahead and accepts him on the project. Well, then Jan Rog wakes up and he's like, I'm going to have that Sentry come to life and attack everybody. And then Captain Marvel is going to have to go fight it. And that is where the issue ends. In terms of the quality of this issue, Colan-Reinman is not a great combination, but it's also not terrible. It's, I've seen a lot worse inkers on Colan. And it's great to have, I think it's a good idea to have Captain Marvel fight the Sentry. Perfectly fine developments with Jan Rog and Una. And it's great to get Carol Danvers introduced. So not a terrible issue, but also not a great issue. What do you think, Steve?
It had its highs and lows. I was not a fan of Reinman inking this, as I said. Yes, it's not as bad as Coletta inking Colan, but that's damning with faint praise. A couple of weird little things in here. Page 3, the hotel proprietor or boarding house or whatever this is refers to their location as, well, he says, yep, he's a strange one, all right. Wonder if he works at the Cape. And then later in the issue, somebody else refers to their location as the Cape. So presumably Cape Canaveral. And yet, on the bottom of page 3, panel 4, we see the cliffs of coastal Florida.
Right. Not a lot of cliffs there.
No, I'm thinking that Colan was thinking this was somewhere out west. JPL or something like that. But according to the text, they are in Florida, which does not match. At one point, Jan Rog is referring to sending a beam of endless streams of ionized electrons. An ion is basically an atom that has too many or too few electrons. So ionized electrons, I don't know what those would be, but you know what? This is comic book science, so that is not something that I should be paying any attention to. One panel that I don't know whether to blame this on Colan or on Reinman, probably Colan. Page 16, panel 2. Can you take a look at the image of the sentry?
Yeah, that's a rather busty looking sentry there.
Yeah, so I think so. It's sort of hard to describe to the listener what is going on here, but basically we are looking down on the sentry in what should be kind of a forced perspective as the sentry is wreaking havoc. But I think that the problem here is that the head is about half the size it should be and way too far back on the shoulders.
Yeah.
I think that if it were, maybe 1.5 to 2 times its current size and moved downward by an inch or so on the page, I think that this wouldn't have jumped out at me as a weird panel. But as it is, it's like, what is going on with this thing?
Yes.
Although, on the other hand, page 16, panel 3 is a fantastic image of the sentry wreaking havoc in this base.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I am not particularly interested in Marvel at this point in time. It is interesting to get Carol Danvers introduced. There's really not much to her yet, and I'll have to see how I like or dislike what they're really doing with her character going forward.
Yeah, and then at the end, there's a letter from Dave Cockrum asking for more stories of the medieval Black Knight.
And Dave Cockrum, who goes on to draw Ms. Marvel and design her black lightning bolt costume.
Yes, good point. So I should point out that when they did the Supergirl TV show, they referred to her secret identity as Kara Danvers. And I remember going like, Kara Danvers, isn't that really similar to Carol Danvers? And I'm like, and I guess Supergirl was introduced first, but I don't think Supergirl was ever referred to as Kara Danvers at this point. I think that her name was Kara Zor-El, and sometimes she would use a manufactured secret identity called Linda Danvers, but no one ever called her Kara Danvers until after Carol Danvers was already a major thing. So I think that even though Supergirl was introduced first, I think that her having the secret identity Kara Danvers, being so close to Carol Danvers, was essentially her stealing from Carol Danvers, not the other way around.
All right, so I think that we are done with this month. Any further thoughts you have before we sign off here, Matt?
Nope, this is a good month of comics. Sorry that we made you wait a little bit longer to hear it, audience, than you would normally wait. But we all had some good August vacations, and that's the way it works out. But anyway, we will see you guys soon.
Yes, we will be back within your ear holes one more time in a couple weeks. So thanks a lot, everybody. Take care, and as always, stay safe out there.
Okay, bye, guys.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.